Last Friday was the shortest day of the year, but depending on how you look at it, it was the longest night. But it was the day with the least light in the whole year. The winter solstice marks the beginning of winter, but also the days begin to lengthen from now on. And before you know it, it'll be March and we'll be in daylight savings time again. We like the light. We prefer the light. It represents something spiritual to us, as Jennifer read this morning. We often ignore the darkness. And the darkness has deep meaning and can have a profound effect on our spiritual awareness if we allow ourselves to visit it occasionally. We had a power outage here a couple of weeks ago. Any of you were affected by that one? I know it affected like 45 different residences around this area. I was up in my office working on the computer before class when suddenly it just went black. So what was the first thing I did? I sought a light source, right? Thank heavens for smartphones with a little flashlight thing. But it made me think about how adverse we are to the dark, how we prefer light. Light is where the action is. Dark is where everything stops. I read a really interesting article recently by a scientist. He said the reason why so many Westerners have insomnia, and you know, this is a widespread problem in our culture. People don't sleep, or they don't sleep well, or they can't stay asleep. You read articles about it all the time, all over the internet. And he said, it's because we have lit up the world with artificial light. It's too light. And people have night lights in their bathrooms, they have night lights in their bedrooms, or some people leave lights on all night long. We are rarely in real darkness. So consequently, and this is this scientist's point of view that I found so interesting. He said, if we don't have real darkness, we will never get to the dreamless sleep state that is optimal for mental health. Now, we all love dreams. Don't you love dreams? And you think, oh my God, I had the greatest dream last night. Or you can't wait to tell your friends about their dreams, and you get really bored listening to theirs, but even so. Nobody wants to hear about your dreams, right? Everybody likes to dream, but that's not where the healing happens, and this is a science. Dreamless sleep is absolutely necessary, and it is in the darkness. And it has deep meaning spiritually. We don't talk about it much. You know, we talk about the dark night of the soul sometimes when you're going through something particularly challenging, traumatic, or trying. But there are other references to darkness that have to do with our deeper inner self. When we're in a state of transcendence, or deep meditation, or dreamless sleep, we have entered the dark of non-action. We have entered the state of being without doing. It's extremely healing to the body, to the emotions, to the mind, but it is also awakening spiritually. We cease to think, and in those few moments, that transcendent time, we merge with the source. The drop goes back into the ocean. It reminds me of a saying from Emerson. He said, a sleeping child gives me the impression of a traveler in a far country. And that's what happens in the dreamless state. We are wandering in the realm of the being. We are in the deepest state of non-doing, which is incredibly healing. So the dark is where there's no action. You know, there's an old East Indian saying, in fact, Ernest Holmes quoted it in the Science of Mind book. It says, to the one who can perfectly practice inaction, all things are possible. That's quite a statement. It's also, you know, it makes us think, what? How can you practice inaction, and then all things are possible. What he's referring to, when we go into the non-doing state, into the being state, we come out of it clearer. We come out of it with a greater sense of our wholeness. We bring some of that energy back with us, and then our doing becomes more directed, becomes more intentional. We have a greater and expanded awareness. And, you know, people always say, I've heard people ask this question over the years, and I've asked it myself, why do people sleep? And I was reading an article recently about only big mammals sleep, or developed mammals. Fish don't sleep in the same way that we do. We are meant to go back in and just experience our aliveness without even knowing we're doing it. Dreaming, I think, there's a lot of conjecture about what dreaming is. Some people say it's collating information. Some people say it's taking things from the subconscious as messages. But it is definitely thinking. It is definitely an activity of the brain. And when we go into the darkness, the analytic mind has to go take a nap. The thinking mind stops, and that's what's so useful to us. So when we re-enter the light, you know, we open our eyes. We are the drop again, but we've been in the ocean, and we're not the same. We come back a little bit stronger, and at the same time feeling a little bit lighter. Does the ocean call to the drop? Yeah. You know, there's such a great interest in meditation in the Western world, but people make it so difficult and they have such a hard time doing it. But there's something in us that is responding to something else that's pulling us. And it is that darkness. It is the inner state. It is the God self, if you will, the spiritual self. The water is calling to the drop. Come home, come home, come home. And that's our choice. Do we want to be completely outwardly directed in this world, or do we want to live in a greater state of ease and balance? I think the answer is obvious, isn't it? Because people in this room, we're looking for balance. We're looking for that state of grace, equilibrium, where we're more responsive and less reactive, yes? Shake your head. I just want to know you're out there. Okay, so this time of year is the Christian celebration of the birth of the Christ. Christ is a word that means illumination. We all know that Jesus Christ wasn't his name, right? It's a reference to a state of being. It doesn't know separation from source. The drop says, the ocean and I are one. And this great master teacher said, the source and I are one. He referred to it as the Father. The source and I are one. So the Christ is the spark of God in us. It is the divinity, if you will, in us. It is our spiritual potential, our spiritual wholeness. It is the universal aspect of our nature. That is the Christ within. And it emerges from the darkness of non-doing into the realm of light, which is doing. And we bring with us, if we visit it regularly, some of that energy, the remembrance, kind of the remembrance of our own wholeness. And it feels like happy for no reason. It's just a sense of well-being, a sense of being connected to something we've been seeking and we know we belong with, and we have found it. So the Christ being the light, it's ironic that it lives in the darkest part of mind where there is no light, because light connotes the outer world. So my message today is don't be afraid of the dark, cultivate it. Go there. Turn off the lights. I mean, not now because it's Christmas, but afterwards. Find a way to really live in some darkness. You know, in the Himalayas, the great Tibetan monks sit in dark caves for years and meditate. There's a reference in many spiritual traditions about going into the closet, going into the cave, going into the dark. This is what we're talking about. I want to read a passage from Matthew Fox, who I adore, former Catholic priest. I told you about him, who was silenced by the church for speaking about the Christ in all of us, and is now an Episcopal priest. He wrote this about the power of darkness. I love this. He said, when we die, no one will ask us where we have been or what we've been doing. There is no judgment in the Godhead. There is such total unity that no one has missed us. And I would interject, does the ocean miss a drop? No. The drop might miss the ocean, though. Think about that, he said. In the Godhead, there is total silence. It is the abyss. In the darkness, we are not being judged. We can't be. The analytic brain has to take a nap in the dark. We're being sensed, and we're picking up perhaps some of the field energy that we don't catch when the lights are too bright. This doesn't make either dimension wrong or better, but necessary. You know, the world of doing is so seductive, and it's fun, and there's pain and pleasure, but it's beautiful. I mean, I always use that wonderful quote from Joseph Campbell, life is great except it hurts. But it's both, right? It's both. But we're overly directed in that sense in our culture. We are overly involved in doing, thinking, and not very much in being and silence and gathering that energy from our greater source, the Christ within us. So we're less prepared to go out in the world as we could be. He may have been referencing death in that quote, but what he said is also true of dreamless sleep and the deepest feelings of grief. You know, there's an awful lot in our culture about healing grief, when really it's an experience of the darkness in the light. And we are meant to go right into it and just be with it and feel it and allow it to float away. It doesn't change anything about our feelings towards the person or situation or relationship that may have been gone, but it allows us to feel the enormity of life again, the temporariness of it, the changing patterns of it, and to be okay with that. See, to resist grief is to resist change, and it's to fear the darkness. And we associate the darkness with death. This time of year, with all the lights, we are celebrating birth, the coming out of the darkness as the Christ incarnate. I remember this guy that came to speak in Calgary once. What was his name? See if I can get it. I just thought of it. But he had a great story of healing. His body had been almost completely mangled by an accident, and he came back. They said he would never stand again. He did. He would never walk again. He did. He would never find his true voice again. He did. And he actually stood up in one of our centers and said, I am not a victim of life. I am the Christ incarnate. I went, whoa. Now there's a person who really experienced something. He experienced the Christ within, the light, the flame, the fire, the passion that got him up on his feet and got him out back in the light again. But he went through a real dark time to get there. But it's a wonderful example of how people can overcome things. How could we overcome anything if we were less than the experience? We're greater than the experience, always, yeah? So I wrote this on Friday. I just want to share some of it. Because this is a religious holiday for a lot of people, but we cannot forget that much of religion is metaphor. Very powerful metaphor and very worth looking at, but metaphor. There's deep meaning in it, but we can't get to the real juice of it if we take the stories only at face value. First of all, they're not about some special person who was greater than anyone else. All the tales of miracles and redemptions are teaching lessons about being human. I've always said Jesus did not come here to teach us how to be spiritual. He came here to show us how to be human, how to bring the spiritual self into the human time-space dimension, out of the darkness into the light. It's not easy. It's not easy being green. It's not easy being spiritual, infinite in a finite situation, in in a body. Imagine how a newborn feels. Here's this immense, powerful spirit choosing to be individualized, and then boom, he's that big. And people can pick him up and move him around without his permission and treat him like the Sunday chicken with oil. And yeah. Imagine what a shock that is to the soul. Actually, the great Paramahansa Yogananda wrote about that, how shocking it is to the soul to be suddenly in a 7-pound body, unable to walk, talk, or move. You know, wah! You know, what is this? I can remember when I was born, and I know you think I'm crazy, but I can remember going, oh God, I did it again. I seriously, it was a feeling of resignation, like, oh, okay, let's see if I can get it better this time. Anyway, back to we're capable of great change. Just look at people. We all know people, and you might be one of them, who have overcome a great addiction. Think about how hard that is to do, but we do it. Some of our childhoods are the stuff of terrible novels that you don't want to read. We get over them. How is that possible? Unless we had this other self, this greater light, this Christ, this spark of divinity that allowed us to stand apart from the experience and say, that's not who I am. That's something that happened. Can you do that with your life? It's a great leap if you can do that. That's not who I am, never was, but it's just what happened. Didn't like it, wish it hadn't. Yeah, it influenced me, but it's not who I am. Whew. Have you ever changed your mind about something? I asked this the other night in class. If you have, you've seen real shifts in your experience. A changed mind changes the outer world, right? So think about what that indicates, the power of it. Do you know that we're always talking about superpowers, and there are all these movies about kids with superpowers? Human beings have superpowers. We do. We can move the planet around with our mind. We can change experience, change it. We are at cause all the time. We can change the effects in the world, beginning with our own body. We have superpowers. Love is a superpower. You know what love can do, right? When you decide to love instead of hate or being indifferent, it changes everything. Joy is a power. Peace is a power. So the power of mind is stunning. But real change also involves feelings. And we call that the heart. That's what happens in the darkness. The heart starts to beat a little stronger. We call it opening up. The feeling nature arises. It's kind of hard in the outer world to feel the real feeling nature of the soul self because we're reacting to what other people are doing. And our psychology gets involved, like, and all the things we go through. But the real feeling nature is that of a joyful child at play. The real feeling nature is optimistic. It's beyond hopeful. It's just ready to manifest something wonderful, to play in the world. So the feeling nature manifests as conviction, as a deep belief that the kind of awareness, it's the kind of awareness that our fulfillment is already at hand, that the desire that we have set in motion is already real in the field of the dark, and it comes through us, not to us. We bring it out by means of our doing, and our doing is informed by how we feel about being. And that's it. So how we feel about being is extremely important, and we won't find it outside of ourselves. That's just a reflection of how we're doing. So this season in the Christian world is the celebration of birth. It's about how light comes into form, and it's a metaphor, from above. But if you read those stories as metaphor, you'll see it's also about how life, the form of life, comes up from the ground, the darkness as the mother. So it's Father Sky, Mother Earth, as above, so below, that the light enters and the form arises, comes out of the dark. And you know, the darkness, as a spiritual metaphor, is always associated with the womb, with the mother, with feminine has been largely ignored in Western culture, and it's a problem. So it's all there: health, wealth, love, joy, peace, creativity. These are our superpowers. And they're alive in us right now, awaiting our attention, awaiting our intention, awaiting our choice to feel them and to bring them out into the world of doing, to release them. And we start next week, we'll talk a lot about letting go of the past. It's paramount at this time of year that we do this. These are spiritual rituals that involve choice, where we say, this I release, this I welcome. Because of the power of the mind, it's important that we pay attention to what we're taking with us next year. And it's a good marker. It's just a marker, but it's a good one. Okay, so what will we bring out of the dark into the light? What beautiful qualities have we kept hidden because we were so overly involved with the world of action and getting things done that we lost touch with our true nature? So I want us all, including myself today, to think about how you've treated others this past year. Are you happy with your choices? Could you have made better ones? How loving are you, really? How life-supporting? How compassionate? How kind? His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, kindness is my religion. And his favorite affirmation of all is, may all beings be happy. Very simple, very powerful. Have you been self-protective? If that's a common one. Afraid of being hurt? Have you hurt others to promote yourself? This is the time to go back to the dark place and sit with the whole ocean. You know, Rumi, we had this wonderful Taizé ceremony the other night with the words of Rumi set to music. And there was one, we didn't play it that night, but it's a great one. It's called Listen, Old Drop. It says, who indeed should be so fortunate, an ocean wooing the drop? Speaking about us. Think about this. Why do we love and revere saints, sages, mystics, and authentic teachers? It's because they have mastered the art of bringing the energy of the dark into the light. And we call it balance. We call it walking the talk. We call it realness or authenticity, genuineness. It's a dance of balance, and we're all meant to live in it. We're all meant to live in a state of grace. And grace to me means flow, effortlessness, and not fighting the world, but creating it from deep inside. So we're all meant to live in this world of light from a deep place of darkness. And when we do, we become the change we wish to see in the world. That's what's going to bring peace to the world, is a change in each human being, reclaiming themselves as the superpower with great gifts to bring to the world. That's true of all of us. We are the Christ incarnate. Let's go within. Let's do this for the world, humanity. We always begin by recognizing that beyond time and space, beyond the light, beyond the doing and the wonderful activities of life, behind it all, there's something else. It is projecting itself from the deepest, darkest place, coming into form from above and below. And this power, this presence is the only power there is. There is none other. It is not in conflict with anything. There are not two powers, there's only one power, and it is the power to make all things new. It makes everything out of itself by becoming the thing it makes, and extends itself by means of the form it takes. That would be you and me and all of humanity, all sentient life, all of nature, is the living presence of the One, revealed in the light coming out of the dark. Let's know for humanity that everything that's going on is the ocean calling to the drop. It's turning people away from activities that do not serve the good. It's causing people to look within and think, what is my part in this? Am I contributing to the problem or the solution? Everything that's going on in the world right now is a revealing of the lack of being awareness. And it is changing. There is a consciousness sweeping through us, awakening many, many people. And on this pre-Christmas day, we can be absolutely certain that Christ is born again and again and again. As Meister Eckhart said, God is always begetting the only begotten. Let us claim our power and see it in everyone else. See it on the people on the news. See it in world leaders. There is a beautiful being that is greater than it seems. Let's call it out. Let's be the ocean calling the drops. Let's know for everybody, the shift is now. There's nothing to fear. Life is wonderful. And we are here to celebrate. And so with deep gratitude for everyone here, for this place, this teaching, and all who have come before us, who kept it alive, who brought it from the dark into the light. We release the power of love coming from our depth into the light of the world. In joy and cheerful anticipation of a transformed world, we let it be, and we declare it is done by saying it together, and so it is.